And now we kind of also circle back to something Peter just mentioned regarding the developments in tech for privacy, so tech preserving measures and innovations that are going on. And we did have a lot of discussions, basically in the past 3 years already, in our Bitkom working group data protection regarding the Privacy Sandbox initiative from Google, and what has been going on there, and what exactly is the goal of it all. So I'm very glad that Marshall Vale, he's the group product manager at Google, and Dr. Marek Jansen, his privacy manager at Google, agreed to join me here today and explain a bit more what lies behind the Sandbox initiative, and if we have time at the end, also answer a few questions. But first of all, welcome and thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's a really great pleasure to be here today at Bitkom Privacy Conference 2022. We would like to share an update on Google's vision to develop new technologies that allow advertising, but in a more private way. And everyone here knows that the internet is a source of free information and tools for billions of people every day, regardless of their income or their status. And access to quality information has never been more important to help people search for answers online, find ways to save money, make more sustainable choices, and stay safe and informed. And most of the free and open web, as we know it, is financed by advertisement. But the main problem is that today, third-party cookies enable the tracking and profiling of people across the web. So advertisers, ad tech companies, publishers use this information for advertisement. And these profiles may have detailed information about a person. Think of demographics, browsing history over time. And these information can be bought and sold by data brokers for further use, even without the user's permission. And so it's not a surprise that people are more concerned than ever about their privacy online, and also that regulators across the world are demanding a more private internet. And this is why we initiate the Privacy Sandbox with technologies implementing established privacy-preserving techniques. Think of data reduction, differential privacy, on-device processing to help protect people's privacy, but also enabling advertisers and publishers to reach their audience without needing to share a detailed online profile. So this means reducing cross-site tracking while helping to keep online content and services free for all. And our approach with the Privacy Sandbox is different from what other companies have done so far. It's a collaborative approach, involves many stakeholders, many perspectives. It's not just a Google initiative. It's an ecosystem project. And today, we would like to guide you through a typical example of what might happen as someone browses the web and see an ad. In each example, in this little journey, you will see how current third-party cookie tracking works and how the Privacy Sandbox technologies, the APIs, improve users' privacy. In our example, you will follow along a user. Let's call her Melissa, as she shops online for a new bike. And with that, I'm handing over to my colleague Marshall to guide you through this little journey.
Thanks very much, Marek. Many studies have shown how important personalized advertising is to the economic health of the free and open web. Personalized advertising works via two key mechanisms: deciding what personalized ad to show, called targeting, and measuring if the ad worked, called attribution. I'll describe two types of targeting and then explain a bit about attribution. So let's now get started with the first type of targeting. Melissa begins researching different bikes online, but with so many options to choose from, she becomes a bit overwhelmed and decides to sleep on it. You know, a few days later, while reading her morning news on youreuronews.com, she sees an ad for a bike that's similar to the one she was looking at. She clicks the ad to check out the details. Now let's take a look at the current state with third-party cookies. Now, Melissa visits various biking websites. Third-party cookies help gather, link, and share all of Melissa's online actions. Every site that Melissa visited is recorded, including specific information like the pages clicked and products purchased, creating a detailed profile about Melissa. As Melissa browses, her browsing history immediately leaves her device as third-party cookies share with various advertiser, publisher, and ad tech servers. These companies now know the specific sites Melissa visited and can collect information and tie it back to Melissa's other browsing history. When Melissa sees an ad tech companies, advertisers, and publishers use Melissa's detailed profile that includes her cross-site browsing history and other information they may collect. This tells them she probably wants a new bike, so she gets a bike ad. And now let's look at the future state with the Privacy Sandbox, with Topics API. Melissa visits various biking websites. If the Topics API is enabled in Chrome, Chrome will group Melissa's interests into a limited number of inferred topics based on the sites Melissa visits. This happens on Melissa's device, and the Topics API doesn't send a user's browsing history off the device. Then these topics, not Melissa's browsing history or a profile, are shared with the ad tech company. Now, when Melissa sees an ad, the ad tech company may use the topics to select an ad. In this case, the topics tell them that a user, I'll say Melissa, on their site has looked at other websites related to cycling, so Melissa gets a bike ad. The tech company doesn't need to know Melissa's personal identity or use a cross-site user profile to show Melissa an ad based on her interests.
Thanks, Marshall. So let's summarize the privacy improvements for interest-based advertising with the Topics API. So first of all, publishers and ad tech companies will only be able to see topics associated with the sites Melissa visited for a limited amount of time. So the Topics API only uses topics related to the last 3 weeks of Melissa's browsing history to show her ads. Very important point is that Melissa has control over which topics are provided by the Topics API. She can see all of her topics in her browser setting. She can remove topics she isn't interested in, and she can also disable the topics feature altogether. And last but not least, the topic selection happens locally on Melissa's device.
So let's talk about another example of targeting. What we just described before was interest-based advertising, where ads are targeted at a general and broad course interest of the particular user. Another example is remarketing ads, where a user may see an ad specifically about an action they took on another site, such as putting an item in a shopping cart. So in this example, later that week, Melissa is reading an article about the latest cooking trends on foodarticles.com when she sees a bike ad for one of the models she was just looking at the other day. So in the current state with third-party cookies, while she was browsing earlier, Melissa spent some time looking at a particular bike model on a retailer site. Of course, her browsing history is being recorded. Now, this information is added to Melissa's profile by ad tech companies and may be shared across servers with advertisers, ad tech companies, and publishers. This happens via third-party cookies, of course. The ad tech company that's serving the ad on foodarticles.com can see she has spent time looking at a specific bike on a specific retail site from earlier. The ad tech company uses her browsing history and profile to select a bike ad to show Melissa. They know which bike to show because they know she spent time looking at a specific model on that other site, the retail site. This is known as remarketing. Now, let's take a look at the future state with the Privacy Sandbox Fledge API, which is designed to address this use case of remarketing. So while she was browsing earlier, Melissa spent some time looking at a particular bike model on a retailer site. An ad tech company working on behalf of the retailer uses the Fledge API to add Melissa to an interest group that is stored in Melissa's browser on her device. This means that ad tech companies will no longer have access to Melissa's cross-site browsing history when the remarketing ad is shown later on another site. The ad tech company that's serving the ad on foodarticles.com will now use the Fledge API to run an ad auction on the user's own device, which determines which particular ad the ad tech company can show an ad for the bike without having to access Melissa's cross-site browsing history.
Thanks, Marshall. So let's look at the privacy improvements for remarketing with the Fledge API. So neither the publisher site, advertisers, or the ad tech company will know Melissa's specific browsing history. Fledge allows Melissa to view which sites inform her ad selection and remove sites she's not interested in. Anything occurs on Melissa's device. And last but not least, it only allows ad tech companies to see an interest group for the ad that will be served. For example, the ad tech company will know to serve an ad for bikes.
Now we've talked about determining which personalized ad to show, known as targeting. But one of the even more important parts is, of course, measuring how the ad performs, whether the user took the action that the advertiser or marketer wanted. And that's where the money flows to keep the free and open web supported. And that's done through attribution. So let's take a look here about how ads are measured through attribution. So Melissa decides that she really likes one of the bikes from an ad she saw. So she goes to that retailer site and purchases it. Over the weekend, she's enjoying a ride on her new bike and is very happy with her purchase. In the current state with third-party cookies, what happens is Melissa goes to the retailer site for one of the ads she saw and purchases the bike she liked best. With third-party cookies, the advertiser and ad tech company could see that she bought the bike after viewing the ad she saw on foodarticles.com, even if it was several days before, because third-party cookies allow them to link her behavior across the sites. Companies typically use this information to measure the performance of their ads. Now, all of these companies use third-party cookies to continue to gain information on Melissa's purchasing behavior over time and can join this information with the rest of her profile to target her in the future. Now, the future state with Privacy Sandbox's attribution reporting API. In this case, Melissa goes to the retailer site for one of the ads she saw and purchases the bike she liked best, of course. The attribution reporting API is a more private way to help publishers, advertisers, and tech companies measure the performance of these ads. So when Melissa views an ad, the browser stores the information locally on her device. Next, when Melissa purchases the bike at some point later, that information is also stored on the browser. The API will then match the ads shown to actual purchases all on Melissa's device. Now, later, the browser sends a measurement report to the advertiser or ad tech or configured publisher, limiting the information about the conversion, adding time delays, and potentially some noise. So that's much more difficult for Melissa to be re-identified across those sites. Now, the browser limits the number of reports that can also be sent off of Melissa's device.
So let's summarize privacy improvements for measurement with the attribution reporting API with this Privacy Sandbox. So first of all, companies can accurately attribute conversion events to advertising campaigns and the websites where the ads run. So this helps them to learn how well the campaigns are performing, but without needing to identify Melissa's cross-site browsing history. And furthermore, the browser enforces limits on the number of conversion types an ad tech company can measure for a single person and adds potential noise, randomized delays to make it even harder to link Melissa's identity across sites. The Attribution Reporting API also provides support for aggregated data, which can provide more detailed information for ad tech advertisers while still maintaining privacy goals through central differential privacy technology. And last but not least, the attribution happens on device.
So these are just a few examples of how new Privacy Sandbox technologies will help protect privacy online while still keeping the internet free to use through online advertising. The proposals are still being tested with the web industry and may still evolve over time. One thing I want to make absolutely clear is that users will also have transparency and control within Chrome over their ad settings.
Exactly, and we recognize that the path forward is very complex, but we think the process is worth the investment to ensure that we create these technologies that supports publishers, creators, other developers in a privacy-safe way. And we don't want users to stick, as they may be subjected to even more invasive alternative tracking methods. Think of fingerprinting, without a privacy-safe alternative that is actually used by the entire industry. So this is why we expanded the time for testing these API until the second half of 2023, when we expect the Privacy Sandbox APIs to be launched and available in Chrome. And that keeps us on course to deprecate third-party cookies by the end of 2024. If you have any further questions, simply visit privacysandbox.com or simply reach out to us. Thank you very much, and I hand back to Rebecca.
Marshall, we do actually have one question in the chat, but due to time constraints, we won't have time to answer that now. But maybe Marek or Marshall, if you have a few minutes, you can try to answer that in the chat section on the platform. But or maybe later as well. But first of all, thank you so much for the great insights. I think all of us learn a bit more about what you've been doing and what you're trying to change in the digital marketing ecosystem, basically. So there are some great steps ahead. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and hope to talk to you soon. Again, thank you for today.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Bye-bye.